So, Prince Michael, I mean, when we look at the response of the Western world when it comes to this Corona crisis at the beginning, basically, I mean, you as an entrepreneur and also as a classic liberal, appreciating the values of freedom and liberty. I was shocked to see that we basically took over the Chinese approach. Were you shocked to see that kind of initiation?
There is a certain obligation to be careful. What I was very shocked about is the paternalism. When I see the German Chancellor saying, yes, I can allow people now to be a bit, to relieve that because the people behaved well. It's not a decision of the Chancellor whether how the people behave. The Chancellor is an employee of the people. And it was even more the attitude which changed me, which shocked me than the measures themselves. But what shocked me as well was that, and this shocked me also by WHO, that they just hailed and said the Chinese did it the right way. You can do it brutally. Sometimes on a short term, an authoritarian system can be a lot more efficient than other ones, but not on the long term. So I think the lesson is we should stay a free society and not try to hail the measures of a very authoritarian system.
But I mean, the backbone of a sound and the free society basically are the small and mid-sized companies. Also the single shop owners, people living in, working in tourism, restaurant owners, hotel owners. I mean, when you look at the Corona measures undertaken by governments, I mean, it was really crashing that kind of sector, destroying basically. Also, I mean, some people are looking at it saying that these were also the guys who were critical when it comes to a super state. They were happy as long as they have to pay less taxes. I mean, they had their own business. But I mean, these guys. I mean, I think even now with the second lockdown, which we are right now in. I mean, we can already hear, for example, in Zurich that hotels are closing down even more than in the past. How do you see that? I mean.
Well, I see it extremely dangerous, and it's not really considered. And if we look at only the tourism sector, the hospitality and tourism and travel sector, this employs worldwide a big, I think, about 15% of the world employment, and there are people behind. And not only talking about Europe, let's say that Europeans and Americans can't go to Asia anymore. It's a huge problem for these countries. And we must not forget that this is exactly an industry which also employs the unskilled people. So this is, for instance, will have enormous consequences. We were very successful in fighting poverty and hunger over the last 30 years. There were very good news. There were hunger went down strongly, etc. And we are now losing that.
Yeah, I mean, even Ron Paul said, I mean, it's you only know from authoritarian or totalitarian system when they decide, which business is essential and which not. Yeah. And so the question to me is, I mean, okay, we are now, I mean, at the beginning of this Corona crisis in March, it was flattening the curve, 2 weeks. Not to make sure that the healthcare system is not overwhelmed and so on. Now we are meeting here 8 months after it started, and we still don't know how long it's going to last. I mean, the question is, so what do you think? I mean, if they're going to extend these kind of measures over the coming months, or maybe they talk about end of April, even end of 2021. What is going to be left, of the global economy and the society as we know it? I mean, has the world already changed? I mean,
it's very worrying. I don't think it has necessarily already changed, but it can. If that goes on, it can come to that, and there will be a much larger dependence on the state. And I think this is dangerous because then the state actually, with its capacity to print money, will be the only one who can provide the money. let's assume that there's no big inflation coming over the next years, but I don't know, it might be. But then the state can decide which business is viable or not. And then we have the planned economy.
Yeah. I mean, this is also something, over the past few years we have seen a lot of articles about modern monetary theory, universal basic income. We even had a public vote over here in Switzerland, where the people, I think 78% of the Swiss were saying, no, we don't want to have universal basic income, we don't want to have that interference into our lives. We see it more as a slavery salary at the end of the day. That kind of dialectic over the past few years, now in combination with the lockdown, do you see that this might be a new theory to pay for the transition period?
I have very much the impression that this is planned, because if you see the European decisions, this COVID recovery fund, and then these trillions they have put up for the restart of the economy, but which is mostly dealt to be in the green economy, whatever that means. I'm very much for fighting against pollution. We should fight against waste, etc. But I don't know whether governments or the European Commission or authorities can really judge what is a green economy and what is not.
Yeah, I'm sure you have also seen, the World Economic Forum talking about the Great Reset, talking about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which basically contains those kind of elements. We make, let the old system go down and create a new one, CO2 emission-free green economy. Is that just nonsense, or what is your?
I think it's some sort of. It could become. It can be. I wouldn't say it's just nonsense, but I think it is. It's a very dangerous way, if it's again, because it has a global issue and it has sort of a global impact, and I think that green side worries me less than what they talked about artificial intelligence, etc. I think artificial intelligence is very good because it enhances our possibilities. But they show also that basically that we can, through this digitization, through this system, we net everything together. And that means we have to be part of a system. And it's always dangerous if one becomes part of a system. A system is there to be used, but not a system is not to be there to become a must.
Yeah, I think what really has changed, even though you look into a longer term perspective, I think what really has changed over the last few decades, or the last 20, 30 years, is the digitalization itself. And I think that's a game changer. And what we are witnessing now over the past few years or decades was basically centralization in terms of Google, Facebook, so the centralized. Every coin has two sides. So we have seen the centralized sides, as you mentioned before. Government controls everything. Big data, controlling the people, using it against the people. How do you see? Do you see that? A lot of, I also know that you are interested in blockchain, in cryptocurrencies. You're very open when it comes to these. The decentralized approach, basically. Do you see that there is a backslash, going towards more decentralization over the coming?
I think we will get probably also a mental decoupling. Not only a decoupling, let's say China and the West, but also with people who say, okay, we want to have alternative, and the ones who take the easiest road and just say, well, we go with the general. So I think always when there is a centralization, there is also a counter movement, and I think we can see these counter movements. We can see it already, and it is, for instance, in this cryptocurrency area, etc. These are people who are thinking much freer, much more independent. Whether it's the right solution, we don't know. But I think it's an interesting approach, And I think there will be also two sides, which I think is good, because we need the competition. We need also competition of ideas, which is extremely important. So this is good. But there will be a polarization that one says, well, it's not is how do we collaborate, but this is good and this is bad. Polarization is not necessarily bad. Now at the moment, the worst thing which one can say about the politician is polarizing. But I think a healthy democracy needs different ideas, needs debate, and needs also sometimes polarization.
I mean, you're making a good point, because some people, for example, they truly believe that what we are seeing with Corona is basically a war against Western civilization, a war against Western values, a war against the values of the Enlightenment. So meaning free speech, capitalism, free markets, the family, the belief system, Christianity, which basically had one key message, that the man is born free. So how do you see, because how do you see that?
I see quite a big element of that in there, because if we see, and you said it just, these ideas of freedom and also freedom of choice, Christianity is the only religion who has that, this freedom of choice, and also the self-responsibility. It's not that always the churches didn't always follow that, but actually the core is self-responsibility, freedom of choice. So the whole liberalism is actually based on Christian ideas, but it has also that you have a general responsibility to the next, you should love thy neighbor, etc. But you don't have to make a redistribution, and it's nowhere in Christianity which saying that you have to make a redistribution. There is an attack against all these systems, and there is this cry which says we have to make change. We have to make change. But what does it mean, making change? You can make a change if you know this is your objective. But it's now just making change. I think we are very much going against European values, because the European values are Christian values, are values of individualism, is also values of regional differences. And we are going, I think, towards, and which is apparently wished, some sort of a benevolent bureaucratic technocracy.
Well, I mean...
So could you explain that a little bit?
A benevolent, because with the benevolent bureaucratic technocracy, I would see that people say, we know what is best. And now we set up the system, and as we know what is best, you better comply with that. So it is a very authoritarian, and it is the other coin of the Chinese system, actually. That we claim that we remain democracies, but the bureaucracy becomes very authoritarian. And what I should say is that we are on a trip now from a decentralized democracy to a centralized bureaucracy.
Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, you always have to finance those kind of ideas, of course. And when we look at the financial system, the monetary policies of basically all the big jurisdictions all over the world, inject the trillions of... I always say to the people, 1 trillion in seconds is 37,109 years, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's a huge sum, and we injected since Corona, I think, roughly 7 trillion. So the question is always, of course, as in Austrian economics, you also know, it's never the scarcity of money, it's always the scarcity of goods and services. And so right now we are in that process where we can say, okay, the scarcity of money is not an issue, we even have a new modern terror theory basically behind it. But on the same time, the implications of that lockdown, it's not foreseeable what is coming. You know, the famines, how much companies will lock down, how long it will last. So it's not calculatable for the time being. But that will lead, of course, to an inflationary scenario when it comes to money.
Yeah.
But it's a deflationary scenario when it comes to real goods and services. So, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, they always need somehow to finance it. But I think everything comes to an end, and the question is, you know, will they be able, you know, to finance something, you know, the centralized technocratic state, or is that a pure illusion if you look at it from, you know, from the facts?
Well, I much agree with you, and I think that there's one thing. You know this famous song of Liza Minnelli, "Money Makes the World Go Round."
Yeah.
And it was said it's some sort of like a hymn of capitalism. No, it's actually the hymn of the now existing socialism. It's money makes the world go round, because money is just an aid, a means of exchange. It's goods and services on one side and the need of the people on the other side. And this makes the economy go round. And this is what creates prosperity. Yeah. Money doesn't create prosperity. Money is just a means. You can do it for a short term, but it's actually a bit, for me, it then comes across to Mr. Madoff. Yeah. Maybe we should propose him now for the Nobel Prize in Economics. But looking at another thing, if I see the advantage, and you asked me that before, of the Corona crisis, I think that people really should see then and say, we have to see that health is also our responsibility. Mm-hmm. We have to do, because the best thing against having a strong immune system, and you are responsible for your immune system by your lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, you know, but then it's also, of course, you know, how can we force healthy people to wear masks, for example? I mean, you know, when we look at, you know, you were saying money is a means to an end, and when we go back to the Enlightenment, I mean, Kant was always saying, you know, man is not a means to an end; it's really it has a purpose in itself. So it seems that these things have to be changed in a way.
Yeah, I think you know this mask thing. I was thinking a lot of that. Let's say if we have a flu wave, or even that if you go in a discotheque in a room like that, 80 persons dancing, it might make sense to wear a mask. So, but I don't know. This is something where I'm not so on the mask. I'm not so worried about. But I'm more worried about closing down companies, closing down businesses, etc. I think this is, and also restricting travel.
Yeah, I mean, right now in Switzerland we have 250,000 people in self-quarantine.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you can always, I mean, yeah, you can lock away the people. You don't have to shut down the businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's, you know, for a small, mid-sized company, a single shop. There is no, and so we'll see, you know, if they are going to survive over the coming months or not. So, but in combination, we also have this Bürgerstock meeting in May of the World Economic Forum. The topic is the Great Reset.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you believe can happen until then? You know, are we really? I mean, I think you believe also in cycles. Everything is operating in cycles.
I think that there are cycles, and I think we will. Unfortunately, I'm afraid we will get even more controls, even more regulations, even being more and more forced to adapt certain systems, because you can be, if you want to make a money transfer, you have to give away a good part of your privacy just to be able to pay. Yeah. This is one. Second thing, the welfare state. You depend, and people got used to it, and I think this is the poison of that, got used to it, that actually welfare has now or the health has become the responsibility of the state, not your responsibility anymore. It's the responsibility of the state. And I think this should come back, but I'm afraid this might become even stronger, because one says we need the data, the state needs the data, and the data collection by government will become bigger and bigger. And data, one talks about data will be the oil of the 21st century. But your data you are now giving for free. And your data is valuable. In my opinion, data should have a price. And the government, if they want your data, they have to pay also the price for that. It can be a deduction from the taxes or whatever, but I think your data have a price. And there are people who are making, it's quite interesting, who made certain studies about that and saying, what can the individual data have for a value? And what is very valuable are your medical data, even if you're a healthy person, because there can be a lot of use. But the other data have also, they have a value for market. They bring something to the administration, etc. So they said probably your birth date is not so valuable. It's maybe 20 cents. Okay. But your medical data can be a few $1,000s.
So, okay, I mean, so you are seeing, you're seeing the future pretty centralized and pretty...
Unfortunately, the near future, yes, but I think it will not last forever, because it's a system which is not going to be successful.
Absolutely, central planning never works. It never worked in the
past.
It
never work
in the future.
But sometimes these bureaucratic systems are very resilient.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, this is the biggest problem: is the resilience of bureaucracy.
So if you would, just for the closing, I think it would be nice to hear your opinion of, there is an old saying, we don't have to behead the king if we just can ignore the king. I mean, maybe it's about the authority, the totalitarian state. Do you think that if you think about people, how can they protect them the best way? What would you do if they would be in their position? And we see people leaving cities, the big cities area, they're going on the countryside and so on. Mm-hmm. I think the digitalization, we have 3D printing, we have the cryptocurrencies as a superior medium of exchange. We have gold as a store of value. Do you believe that it will even be possible to see, a centralized system, but at the same time some spots popping up which are taking themselves out of the system, because we're going to see restriction of movement anyway. So basically kind of ignoring it.
I think that there are different ways one can do it. First, being very careful what data you give for free. Yeah. Some you're forced to give, I'm sure, but still being very, very careful on that. Then trying to be well informed, and I think what is going to be more and more important, also speaking out. Mm-hmm. Also, I would say taking roles in local politics. Mm-hmm. Being careful with the media, using in a good way the social media, and so being active. It will be difficult probably just to think a change is we are retreating, we are going back into our snail house and wait till it goes by. This might be also a tactic, but then it means that the system, the centralized system, will last a lot longer. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be good if people would try to speak out more to the other, but it's difficult, and also people should be less impressed by political correctness. And for me, political correctness is the censorship of the 21st century.
Thank you very much, Prince Michael, for this interview. I think that's a great ending of the interview. Mm-hmm. And so it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.